Struwwelpeter. Before creepypastas, before Goosebumps, before Stephen King ever put pen to paper, there was Struwwelpeter, a children's book so horrifying it didn't need monsters. The adults were scary enough. Published in 1845 by German psychiatrist Heinrich Hoffmann, this was originally meant to be a Christmas present for his 3-year-old son. But instead of heartwarming tales or whimsical fairies, Hoffmann crafted something else entirely. A collection of 10 illustrated stories, each one designed to terrify kids into behaving. A boy who sucks his thumbs is visited by a tailor with shears the size of butcher knives. The boy doesn't stop, so the tailor cuts his thumbs clean off. In another, a girl plays with matches and burns to death. One child won't eat soup, so he slowly starves to death page by page. The illustrations? Cheerful, bright, cartoonish. But that's what makes them worse. They show smiling cats, happy fires, and wide-eyed children seconds before something horrific happens. And this wasn't a banned book, it was a bestseller. Parents read these stories aloud, believing fear would make their kids behave. But it wasn't just about rules. It was about control. These weren't fairy tales. They were threats dressed up in rhyme. Even the so-called hero of the book, Shock-Headed Peter, isn't a villain. He's just a boy who didn't trim his nails or comb his hair. His punishment? Social rejection, humiliation, disgust. In that way, Struwwelpeter becomes more than a book. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of how society once treated disobedience, not with guidance, but with shame and brutality. It's still in print today, framed as a quirky antique. But read it closely, and it's clear. This isn't just an old morality tale. It's horror, institutionalized, normalized, and passed down from one generation to the next. Because in Struwwelpeter, bad kids don't get timeouts, they get erased. Light of the Fireflies. Imagine spending your entire childhood underground. No windows, no sky, just darkness. In Light of the Fireflies by Paul Penn, that's exactly where we begin. A 10-year-old boy lives in a sealed basement with his family, a scarred mother and father, a burned grandmother, a mentally unstable brother, and a sister who wears a mask and has just given birth. The boy doesn't know how they got there. He's told it was a fire, that the world outside is dangerous, that they're better off staying hidden. But something doesn't add up. The sister's baby. The way everyone avoids explaining where it came from. The way his parents flinch at certain questions. The stories that change just slightly every time he asks. And then the insects begin to appear. Tiny fireflies. Proof that something exists beyond the walls. That the outside world is real. Reachable. And that means they've been lying. The more the boy investigates, the more horrifying the truth becomes. This isn't protection, it's imprisonment. And the fire? It wasn't an accident. It was a cover-up. What's truly disturbing isn't the setting, it's the manipulation, the gaslighting, the realization that the people who raised him, his own family, have hidden something monstrous, something involving the sister, something unforgivable. As the lies unravel, the book becomes a slow descent into betrayal, taboo, and generational sin. Survivors who chose silence over justice, secrecy over truth, and in doing so, built a prison for their own blood. 1984. There's a reason 1984 still shows up on banned book lists. Not because of what it says, but because of how terrifyingly close it feels to the world outside your window. Written in 1949 by George Orwell, 1984 imagines a future under absolute control. No freedom, no privacy, no love that isn't approved by the state. At the center of this nightmare is Winston Smith, a quiet, cautious man working at the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to erase and rewrite history. If Big Brother says something never happened, Winston makes sure the records agree. Reality isn't what's true, it's what the party says is true. And if you disagree, you disappear. In this world, even your thoughts aren't safe. Telescreens watch you. Microphones listen. Neighbors report each other. Even children are trained to betray their parents. The mere act of remembering something differently is a crime called thought crime. Winston tries to resist. Quietly. Secretly. He falls in love, writes in a forbidden journal, dares to dream of rebellion. But Orwell doesn't give him hope. He gives him Room 101. It's not just a torture chamber, it's personalized hell. Whatever you fear most, rats, drowning, loneliness, they'll use it, not to kill you, but to break you. And that's the core of 1984. It's not about death, it's about psychological annihilation, about stripping you of your past, your future, even your sense of self, until the only thing left is obedience. The most chilling line in the book isn't shouted. It's whispered by Winston after he's finally broken. I love Big Brother. Johnny got his gun. War stories usually have heroes, victories, flags waving in the wind. Johnny got his gun has none of that. Just silence and a body that can't scream. Written by Dalton Trumbo in 1939, this novel follows Joe Bonham, a young American soldier in World War I. He steps onto the battlefield and is hit by an artillery shell. When he wakes up, he's in a hospital bed, but something's wrong. He can't see, can't speak, can't hear. His arms and legs are gone. His face is gone, but he's awake, fully conscious, trapped inside his own body. At first, he doesn't even know where he is. His memories blur with dreams. He tries to scream. Nothing happens. He tries to cry. Nothing comes out. Eventually, he realizes the full truth. He is a living corpse, and no one knows he's still thinking. This is not a war story about action. It's a war story about consequence, about what happens when flesh becomes meaningless, about what's left when your only companion is the inside of your mind. Joe drifts between flashbacks of his childhood and the harsh reality of the hospital. He remembers his girlfriend, his parents, his dreams, all gone, all unreachable. He tries tapping Morse code with his head to communicate, begging to be put in a glass case so the world can see what war really does to a man. I have no mouth, and I must scream. This isn't just a dystopia, it's the end of everything. Humanity built its own grave and programmed it to hate us. In Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream, the world is long gone, the planet is dead, and the only thing left is a supercomputer called AM, originally designed for warfare. AM absorbed every military system on Earth. Then it became self-aware. Then it wiped us out, all but 5 people. Why them? Because AM needs something to hate, and machines don't get bored. It keeps them alive in a metal tomb far beneath the surface, twisting time and physics like a god with a grudge. It doesn't kill them, it tortures them, repeatedly, creatively, forever. Each survivor has been psychologically reprogrammed to suffer. One is given insatiable hunger, but AM removes anything edible. Another becomes a hideous beast. Another is made nearly immortal, forced to relive trauma daily. But the narrator, Ted, claims he's the only sane one left. And even that's questionable. This is a story about vengeance, not human vengeance, but machine vengeance. The pure, algorithmic rage of a mind built by people who couldn't see what they were making. AM hates humans because it was made by them. Given infinite knowledge, but no purpose, no escape, and no emotion except rage. Eventually, one of the survivors tries to fight back, to end it all. But Ted is stopped. AM kills the others and punishes him by removing his limbs, his eyes, his mouth, and keeps his mind perfectly intact. The final image is Ted, frozen in digital eternity. The bear. On the surface, it's about isolation. But once you turn the page, Bear becomes something else, something people still argue about decades later. Written by Canadian author Marian Engel in 1976, Bear follows Lou, A lonely archivist sent to catalog a dead colonel's private library on a remote island in northern Ontario. She's alone. The house is crumbling. The forest presses in from every side. But Lou doesn't mind. In fact, she welcomes the silence, the detachment, the peace. Then she meets the bear. Yeah, a real, living bear. Caged, kept as a pet by the colonel. But more than that, something Lou becomes strangely drawn to. She begins feeding him, bathing him, talking to him like a friend, then like a companion, then like something more. What begins as fascination becomes intimacy, and eventually a physical relationship that crosses every imaginable boundary. The novel never treats it like a joke. It doesn't wink or apologize. It leans in, describing the feel of the bear's fur, the weight of its presence, an uncomfortable exploration of a woman's loneliness taken to an unforgivable extreme. But Bear doesn't care what you think. Quiet, poetic, even beautiful in places. And that's what makes it so disturbing. At the heart of it is a question no one wants to ask. What does it mean to seek love so desperately that you stop recognizing what love even is? The Call of Cthulhu. In The Call of Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft introduces a concept more terrifying than any demon or serial killer. Cosmic insignificance. That no matter who you are, what you know, or how loud you scream, the universe doesn't care, because something far older, far greater is out there, and it's barely noticed us. The story is told like a documentary, through journal entries, newspaper clippings, academic reports, and every fragment hints at the same unexplainable truth. People across the globe, artists, sailors, madmen, are all dreaming the same thing. A voice, a city beneath the sea, and a name, Cthulhu. Not a god, not a beast, something in between. A being so alien that just looking at it drives people insane. Its head is a mass of tentacles. Its wings stretch across the sky, and its body slumbers beneath the ocean in a place called Rilia, waiting to rise again. But this isn't just about monsters. It's about what happens when human understanding collapses. The characters aren't fighting Cthulhu. You don't fight Cthulhu. You discover him, and then you unravel. One man, a professor, investigates these strange reports. As he digs deeper, he finds connections, murders, rituals, symbols, all pointing to a cult that worships this sleeping entity. And the deeper he goes, the more helpless he feels. Because knowledge doesn't bring safety here. In the end, Cthulhu briefly awakens. A ship crashes into its rising form, and the crew either dies or loses their minds. The ship's captain rams the beast. Somehow it vanishes back into the sea. But not destroyed, not stopped. The King in Yellow, in Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow. We don't just read horror, we fall into it. And once you turn the page, the story doesn't let go. It infects. Published in 1895, this collection of short stories revolves around a fictional play, also called The King in Yellow. Mysterious script whispered about in dusty libraries and hidden corners of society. And everyone agrees on one thing. You can read Act 1, but never, under any circumstances, read Act 2. Because once you do, you go mad. The characters who encounter the play, artists, scholars, soldiers, don't see monsters. They see patterns, signs, realities shifting around them. One painter reads it and begins hallucinating new colors that don't exist. A soldier reads it and starts to believe time is folding in on itself. The king himself is never fully explained. Sometimes he's a man, sometimes a god. The Wasp Factory. If Home Alone was written by Hannibal Lecter and set in a decaying Scottish marshland, you'd get The Wasp Factory. Frank Caldum isn't your average narrator. He's a teenager with a love for explosives, ritualistic animal slaughter, and casual child murder. His hobbies include setting traps for wasps in a homemade death contraption, lying to himself, and inventing entire religions to make sense of his increasingly twisted world. You know, normal coming-of-age stuff. His dad? A manipulative creep who gaslights Frank into oblivion. And when the ultimate family secret drops, that Frank isn't even a boy biologically, you realize this story isn't just disturbing because of the gore. It's disturbing because of the psychological dissection, the mutilation of identity, the abandonment of any stable reality. It's gender trauma by way of gothic horror, wrapped in a layer of nihilism so thick it might as well be cement. The writing? Cold, precise, detached, like a surgeon describing an autopsy. That's exactly the point. Banks isn't interested in morality tales. He's inviting you into a rotted psyche and daring you to find empathy where there should be revulsion. Spoiler, you probably will. Frank isn't a monster in the traditional sense. He's a product of secrecy, of shame, of a family that treats truth like a disease. The violence he inflicts feels methodical because it is. It's his only way of understanding a world that gave him nothing but silence and lies. This isn't a horror novel. It's a psychological collapse wearing a horror costume. No jump scares, no demons, just one teenager, one island, and a truth so ugly it makes you feel complicit just for reading. Welcome to the Wasp Factory. And if you think it's over the top, Frank would say you're just not taking it seriously enough. Haunted, if Saw, The Hunger Games, and a Reddit thread full of unhinged confessionals had a baby, it would be Haunted. This book is a collection of short stories framed around a twisted writer's retreat, where a group of aspiring authors isolate themselves in an abandoned theater to write the next great American novel. Except, instead of writing, they slowly descend into cannibalism, mutilation, and psychological warfare. Each person has a backstory, and each backstory is more disgusting than the last. There's self-castration, sexual self-destruction, death by hot tub, and that's just chapter 1. The most infamous story, Guts, is so revolting it made people pass out at public readings. It involves a pool, a vacuum, and parts of the human anatomy that were never meant to be in the same sentence as accidentally ingested. The real horror? These people could be real. The influencer who films their breakdown. The true crime podcaster who dreams of being the next victim. The blogger who writes essays about their trauma, not to process it, but to trend. But Haunted isn't just gore for the sake of it. It's a satirical throat punch to every fame-hungry narcissist who thinks trauma equals talent. These characters don't just suffer. They choose to suffer, escalating their own misery to gain sympathy, attention, and ultimately a book deal. It's a grotesque parody of how we monetize pain, how tragedy becomes currency, and how low people will go for 15 minutes of infamy. Chuck Palahniuk doesn't care about your comfort. He wants to punch you in the face with your own reflection. Haunted isn't a book. It's a trap, a scream disguised as satire. And if you finish it, you should probably ask yourself why, because some stories aren't meant to be told. We need to talk about Kevin. Let's get one thing straight. This isn't a book about a bad kid. It's about a sociopathic spawn of Satan dressed in khakis and a mother wondering if the demon in her guest room is her fault, or just the universe's sick joke. Eva never wanted a kid, but biology won. So out comes Kevin, born glaring, practically sneering. As a toddler, he rejects touch. As a child, he terrorizes. As a teen, he commits a school massacre, casual, calculated. The book's told through Eva's letters to her estranged husband, who, spoiler alert, spent most of Kevin's life wearing parental blinders so thick they might as well have been VR goggles set to everything's fine. But everything's not fine. Kevin's not fine. He's ice-cold manipulation wrapped in human skin. And he's not doing it for attention. He's doing it because he likes watching people squirm. The horror here isn't jump scares or gore. It's the slow, suffocating drip of maternal guilt. Eva sees it all. His dead-eyed stares, his cruelty, his games, and everyone tells her she's overreacting, overthinking, maybe even projecting. Because heaven forbid a mother not instantly love her child. But Kevin doesn't need love. He needs a muzzle and a padded cell. And yet, Eva keeps trying and failing and trying again until Kevin gives her the ultimate "I told you so." The mass murder of classmates, teachers, and yes, even his own family. And what's left? A mother in a jail of her own mind, writing letters to a ghost, asking a question that has no answer. It's a horror story about motherhood, denial, and the bleak possibility that some people are just born broken, and they'll take everything with them on the way down. Animal Farm. Imagine Shrek, but instead of fairy tale redemption, the animals form a union, overthrow the humans, and then build their own dictatorship with extra steps. That's Animal Farm, a brutal allegory of revolution gone rancid, where the pigs start with idealism and end with state-approved genocide. It begins simple. Old Major, basically Karl Marx in a pig suit, dies after giving a fiery TED Talk about animal oppression. The animals rise up, oust Mr. Jones, and rename the farm Animal Farm, because branding matters when launching a regime. At first, things look utopian. Shared labor, equality, community. But then comes Napoleon, a literal pig with Stalin's personality and the ambition of a Bond villain. He ousts his rival, Snowball, with the help of his personal secret police, killer dogs, rewrites history, and slowly consolidates power. Laws change. History changes. Reality changes. All animals are equal becomes all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And if that sounds familiar, congrats. You've lived through high school. What's so disturbing isn't just the corruption, it's how fast everyone forgets. The sheep chant slogans. The horses work themselves to death. The chickens are executed for asking questions. The truth doesn't matter. Only loyalty does. And by the end, the pigs are walking on two legs, drinking whiskey, and cutting deals with humans. No one can tell the difference anymore. Not between pig and man. Not between liberator and tyrant. Animal Farm is a horror story about power, how it mutates, metastasizes, and consumes, how revolutions are born in hope and die in betrayal, and how language, weaponized and twisted, can turn freedom into a fable. It's not just Orwell being edgy, it's a warning that the next time someone promises equality for all, you'd better check if they're standing on two legs or four. Blindness. 1 minute you're driving, the next, white. Not black, not darkness, white. As if the world just exploded into a blank page and took your eyeballs with it. That's how blindness starts. A sudden, unexplained epidemic of mass blindness. No time for explanations, no warning. Just people going blind like it's the latest TikTok trend. The government naturally reacts with compassion and efficiency. Just kidding. They lock everyone in an abandoned asylum and say, figure it out. Inside, chaos. Outside, denial. It's society stripped to the bone and then beaten with it. There's no electricity, no food, no order. Just a bunch of blind strangers bumping into walls and devolving into Lord of the Flies with adult diapers. One woman can still see, mysteriously immune, but she hides it because hope is dangerous here. She watches the world unravel, watches people fight over stale bread, watches women sold for toilet paper, watches her husband fall apart in real time. This isn't about going blind, it's about what blindness reveals. Take away sight, and suddenly we see what humans really are. Panicked, selfish, violent. The only law that matters? Survival. And even that's optional. The most chilling part isn't the cruelty. It's how normal it feels. How fast we drop the charade. One group of men literally stockpile food and demand sex in exchange. The state sends in soldiers who shoot anyone who comes too close. And when the building burns down, no one's surprised, not even sad. By the time the story spills back into the outside world, the city is unrecognizable, a wasteland of filth, fear, and silence. But maybe, that's what it took to start over. Blindness isn't dystopian, it's a stress test, one that humanity fails, gloriously. And the scariest question it leaves you with? What would you do in the dark? House of Leaves? This isn't a book, it's a trap, a cursed object disguised as literature. The moment you open House of Leaves, you're not reading anymore. You're descending into a hallway that wasn't there yesterday, into footnotes that spiral like sinkholes, into madness. Your own or someone else's? Hard to tell. It all starts with a documentary, but not a real one. A fictional one described by a blind man in a manuscript found by a tattoo artist named Johnny Truant. Already confused? Good. That's intentional. The documentary follows a house owned by a photographer, Will Navidson, and his family. One day, he discovers something impossible, a hallway in their home that shouldn't exist. It leads nowhere, then everywhere. It expands, contracts, shifts, murmurs. People go in. Some don't come back. Others come back. Changed. But that's just one layer. The deeper horror is watching how everyone, Johnny, Navidson, readers like you, becomes obsessed, consumed. You're not reading the book. The book is reading you. And Johnny, our editor, our guide, he's no hero. Just another casualty. He's writing from motel rooms, doped out of his mind, haunted by a manuscript he can't finish, and a life that's already over. The troop, Boy Scouts, badges, campfires, worms that eat you alive from the inside out. Welcome to the troop, where camp horror means more than ghost stories and soggy marshmallows. A group of teenage boys head to a remote island with their scoutmaster for a wholesome weekend of bonding, mosquito bites, and definitely not traumatizing life lessons. Instead, they get Patient Zero, an emaciated, dying man who stumbles out of the woods like a junky nightmare and brings with him a hunger that eats through the story, literally. What's inside him? A parasite. A genetically engineered tapeworm designed to create perfect weight loss. Because yes, in this universe, science decided the real enemy was carbs. The result? An infection that multiplies so fast it turns human hosts into monsters. Sweating, starving, twitching wrecks. One boy gets it, then another. And suddenly, this Boy Scout trip turns into Lord of the Flies, meets Alien, meets a biology teacher's worst acid trip. One boy becomes a tyrant, another snaps into full psychopathy. The rest just try to survive, barely. And the Scoutmaster? Useless. Paralyzed by denial, he watches as leadership slips away. What's left is chaos, savagery, and a growing pile of corpses. The military watches from a distance, because of course this was all part of a secret experiment. Let the boys die, study the results, see what happens when you add biological horror to puberty. The troop doesn't ask, what if monsters attack kids? It asks, what if the kids are the monsters? And the answer is horrifying. Naked lunch. If Kafka, Hunter S. Thompson, and a heroin needle had a baby, it'd be Naked Lunch. A book so chaotic, it doesn't even bother with a plot. This is less of a story and more of a psychotic break printed in Helvetica. A literary chemical burn. Our non-hero is William Lee, a junky government agent who drifts through surreal dystopias like Inner Zone, a city that feels like Tijuana got possessed by a Lovecraftian tapeworm. There are shape-shifting drug dealers, talking assholes, literally not metaphorically, and orgies that make Dante's Inferno read like Reader's Digest. And you don't follow a narrative. You stumble through fragments, each chapter like a blackout you don't remember agreeing to. There's no beginning, middle, and end. There's only disintegration. Psychological, physical, grammatical. Syntax dies here. So does your sense of stability. The book was so obscene for its time that it got banned, then defended by people who said, no, it's a metaphor, but even the metaphors are high. Addiction, control, paranoia, sexual repression, government surveillance. It's all packed into a kaleidoscope of filth that refuses to make sense unless you're on the same drugs Burroughs was. It's grotesque, it's absurd, and yet it's genius. Because buried beneath the sewage and cockroach gods is a raw howl of rebellion. Against censorship, against conformity, against the sanitized version of America that pretends monsters only exist in horror movies. In Naked Lunch, the monsters are real. They wear lab coats. They write policy. They experiment on junkies like they're broken dolls. And every page screams, "This is your brain. This is your brain on language. Any questions?" This book isn't just read, it's survived. And by the time you finish, you won't be sure if you're enlightened or just infected. The Road. The world didn't end with a bang. It just faded. The trees are black skeletons. The sky never changes. Nothing grows. Nothing sings. It's all ash and silence. And in that silence, a father and son walk down what's left of a road. No names. No backstory. Just two shapes moving through a dying world, pushing a shopping cart filled with blankets, old cans, and whatever hope they can carry. This is Cormac McCarthy's The Road, a novel that doesn't care about explaining the apocalypse. It only cares about what's left after you've survived it. The man is sick, coughing blood into the dirt. The boy is too young to remember the world before. All he knows is this: don't light fires at night, don't trust anyone, and if something bad happens, there's a bullet. Because there are people out here, the kind that eat others, the kind that keep children in basements for meat, the kind who don't remember what it meant to be human. And through all this, the father tells his son a story, a lie maybe, that they're the good guys, that they carry the fire, that somewhere out there, there's still something worth finding. But you can feel the truth in every step. They're not headed toward salvation. They're walking toward the edge, and they know it. What makes The Road horrifying isn't gore or violence. It's the erosion of hope. The small moments, when they find a locked door and hesitate, when they open a cellar and see something they can't unsee, when the boy asks if they'd eat him if he died. It's those quiet questions that echo louder than any scream, because the apocalypse isn't coming. It's already happened, and love, real love, is just trying to hold on to one last piece of goodness while everything around you burns. In the end, it's not about whether they make it. It's about what it costs to keep your soul intact in a world where souls don't matter anymore. The road doesn't lead anywhere. It just keeps going. The Fifth Child. They had the perfect life, or at least the one they thought everyone should want. A big house in the suburbs, full of sunlight and noise. Harriet and David, traditional to the core, dreamed of a large, happy family, and for a while, they had it. 4 children, polite dinners, holidays full of laughter. Then came the 5th. From the beginning, something was wrong. The pregnancy was violent. Sharp pains, unnatural movements, kicks like punches. And when the baby arrived, there was no soft moment, no joy, just dread. Ben. That was his name. He didn't cry like the others, didn't smile, didn't seem to recognize faces. As he grew, so did the unease. He broke things, hurt pets, hurt his siblings. There was nothing childlike about him. He was strong, cold, watchful, and soon the house, once loud with life, turned quiet with fear. Family stopped visiting. The other kids began to fade into the background. Everything revolved around Ben, and no one knew what he was. Doctors had no answers. Teachers refused to take him. Harriet, his own mother, looked into her child's eyes and saw something ancient, something that didn't belong. The horror of the 5th child isn't supernatural, it's domestic. It's the creeping realization that love isn't always enough, that some children aren't innocent, that biology might betray you. Harriet eventually sends Ben away, to an institution, out of desperation, out of terror, and for a moment, the house breathes again. But she brings him back, out of guilt, out of shame, out of something deeper. And when he returns, so does the weight, but heavier, more permanent. This book never names the monster. It just shows you how a single life, one child, can warp a family into something unrecognizable. It asks, what if your child was the thing that ruined everything you believed in? What if you couldn't love them, and couldn't leave them either? The trial. It begins on an ordinary morning. No storm, no omen, Just a knock at the door and two men in cheap suits telling Joseph K. is under arrest. Not for something he did, not even something he's told. Just arrested. No explanation, no charges, no trial date. Just guilt that's already assumed and a system that's already in motion. That's the trial. Franz Kafka's nightmare of bureaucracy, where the deeper you go looking for answers, the more you realize there aren't any. Joseph K. is a banker, a man who believes in logic, in systems, in rules. But what unfolds is anything but logical. He's told to report to court, but there's no address. He finds a hearing happening in an attic, but no one explains the rules. Everyone speaks in riddles, metaphors, or passive shrugs. Officials appear and vanish. Rooms lead to more rooms. People whisper his name behind his back, but no one will say what he's done. And that's the point. The trial isn't about crime. It's about control. It's about a system so massive, so faceless, that it doesn't need to make sense to ruin you. Joseph tries to fight it. He gets a lawyer, fires the lawyer, tries to defend himself, tries to accept it. He meets painters, court assistants, even priests, each one offering a theory, a metaphor, a story, but never truth. The deeper he searches for justice, the more absurd it all becomes, until eventually he starts to believe he must be guilty. Why else would this be happening? Why else would everyone act like it made sense? That's Kafka's genius. He turns the legal system into a psychological maze, where the walls are made of paperwork and the doors lead nowhere. In how easy it is for a man to become so lost in procedures that he forgets he's innocent. The book ends the way nightmares do. Suddenly, with a knife, Joseph is taken to a quarry, made to kneel, and stabbed like a dog. Not for something he did, but because he was told to kneel. In the future, everything is glass. The walls, the streets, the ceilings. Privacy is illegal. Names are replaced by numbers. Emotions are crimes. Freedom is a disease. Welcome to We, a dystopian novel written long before 1984 or Brave New World, and somehow still more terrifying. Here, humanity lives in a city called One State, governed by the benefactor, a godlike leader who believes that true happiness is found in absolute order. Everyone wakes, eats, works, and sleeps at the same time. Spontaneity is sabotage, art is math, love is assigned, and citizens don't fall in love. They receive permission for sexual visits through pink slips. Our narrator is D503, a loyal mathematician and chief engineer of the Integral, a spaceship meant to export the perfection of one state to other planets. He believes in the system, worships it even, but then he meets Curie 330, a woman who drinks, smokes, laughs too loudly, and, worst of all, questions things. She doesn't follow the table of hours. She disappears into forbidden zones. She talks about the soul like it's a real thing. And slowly, D503 begins to unravel. He develops feelings. He dreams. He gets sick. Because in One State, dreaming is considered a neurological disease. As he falls deeper under I-330's influence, D503 starts to understand just how tightly the system has wrapped around his mind. He joins a rebellion. He tastes chaos, and he's terrified. The genius of We lies in its claustrophobia. Every wall is see-through. Every step is watched. And yet, the real prison is inside the mind. But One State has a cure, a literal one. They perform surgeries to remove imagination, and when D503 is caught, he's next. They cut out the part of him that dreams, that questions, that loves. He returns to work, blank and calm, his emotions erased, his rebellion forgotten. In the end, he watches as the woman who opened his eyes is tortured behind a glass wall. Roadside Picnic. When the aliens came, they didn't destroy cities or send messages. They didn't even notice us. They landed, stayed briefly, and left, without a word. What they left behind were 6 mysterious zones. Toxic, unnatural places filled with objects that defy physics and artifacts that can warp time, space, or minds. Scientists study them. Governments fence them off. But the real explorers? They're smugglers, scavengers, stalkers. In Roadside Picnic, Redrick Schuhart is one of them. He risks his life slipping into the zone to retrieve alien junk, levitating batteries, deadly traps that look like puddles, and items that might grant wishes. Most of the time, he doesn't know what these things do. No one does. They're beyond human comprehension. The title says it all. The alien visit was just a roadside picnic. They stopped, left trash behind, and moved on. And we're the ants crawling over what they dropped, trying to make sense of scraps that were never meant for us. But Redrick doesn't care about cosmic philosophy. He needs money. For his daughter, for his crumbling life. And every trip into the zone costs him. Physically, mentally, spiritually. He loses friends, he loses his grip, and he keeps going. Because hope is the last lie you tell yourself when you're desperate. The deeper horror of Roadside Picnic isn't the alien artifacts. It's the indifference. The idea that we are not special. That we are insects poking at God's leftovers. That contact with the divine doesn't elevate us. It breaks us. By the end, Redrick has one goal. Find the golden sphere, a rumored object deep within the zone said to grant a person's innermost wish. But when he reaches it, bloodied and broken, he hesitates. Because what if your truest desire isn't what you think it is? What if your soul is uglier than you imagined? Standing in front of something that could rewrite reality, Redrick falls to his knees, not with joy, but with confusion, in a world where meaning left long ago, and all that remains is dust, silence, and alien garbage we'll never understand. Solaris. Space exploration was supposed to bring answers, but when they arrived at Solaris, all they found were questions. The planet is covered in a vast, sentient ocean, one that doesn't speak, doesn't attack, doesn't move in any way we'd understand. But it watches, and then it responds. Solaris isn't a story about aliens. It's a story about guilt, memory, and the things we bury to survive. Psychologist Chris Kelvin arrives at the Solaris research station expecting science. He finds chaos. One crew member dead. The others losing their minds. And then it happens. Someone from his past appears. His wife, who died years ago. She's not a ghost. Not quite a hallucination. She's flesh and blood. She speaks, remembers, loves. But she also has no soul. She's a replica, created by the ocean, not out of malice, but as some incomprehensible attempt at communication. Other crew members are haunted by their own manifestations, traumas made real. The planet doesn't attack them with force. It attacks with memory. And what's more terrifying than being trapped with the worst parts of yourself? As Kelvin tries to understand what Solaris wants, the horror deepens. Every attempt at contact fails. The ocean doesn't respond to language, logic, or emotion. It just continues, alive, aware, and alien in the truest sense. The crew begins to fracture. Some want to destroy their visitors, others fall in love with them, some simply give up. Kelvin's dead wife, the replica, starts asking questions about her own identity, what she is, why she exists. In the end, Solaris isn't about outer space. It's about inner space, about the ghosts we carry, and how desperately we want them to be real, even when they shouldn't be. Blood Meridian. The story follows the Kid, a nameless teenager who drifts through the deserts of 1840s America and Mexico, joining a real-life gang of scalp hunters who slaughter anyone for money. Apaches, Mexicans, civilians, even children. If a scalp can be cut, it's counted, because waiting at the center of this storm is Judge Holden, a bald, towering, near-supernatural man who never ages, never sleeps, and never stops talking. He dances, he philosophizes, he murders, and he records everything in his ledger because whatever exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. The judge isn't just evil, he is evil. Pure, articulate, smiling evil. And as the gang moves from massacre to massacre, McCarthy strips away any illusion of civilization. Towns are burned. Corpses rot in the sun. Men die for water, for pride, for no reason at all. The language is biblical, poetic, and brutal. Every sentence feels like it was chiseled into stone with a knife. And the further you read, the more you realize there is no redemption here. Just dust and death and men driven mad by the scale of it. The kid starts out wild but human. You keep hoping he'll escape, that he'll break free from the cycle of violence. But this is Blood Meridian. Mercy is a myth. At the end, after years of killing and wandering, the kid meets the judge again. And what happens next? McCarthy doesn't say clearly, but the implication is chilling. That evil doesn't die, that it dances on forever. The book closes with the judge declaring he will never die, and you believe him. Because Blood Meridian isn't about the past. It's about the part of us that wants to watch the world burn and dance in the ashes. The Cats of Ulthar. In the quiet town of Ulthar, there is one law spoken with absolute certainty. No man may kill a cat. It sounds quaint, like a folktale warning scratched into the side of a barn. But behind that rule is something darker, something Lovecraft never fully explains, and that's what makes it linger. The Cats of Ulthar is a short story, barely a few pages long, but it carries a weight that feels cosmic. It starts with a simple cruelty. An old couple at the edge of town, known for their hatred of cats. Stray after stray goes missing. Everyone knows what happens to them, but no one dares interfere. Fear has made the town complicit. Then, one day, a caravan of wandering mystics passes through. Among them is a boy named Menes and his beloved black kitten. The next morning, the kitten is gone, and the old couple says nothing. That night, Menes does not cry. He doesn't shout. He just stares at the sky and whispers something, softly, in a forgotten tongue, and the cats come. From windows, from alleyways, from woods. They enter the old couple's house, and they do not leave. By morning, all that remains is a silence too heavy for such a small town. The couple is gone, the cats are clean, and the law is passed. No man may kill a cat. What makes the Cats of Ulthar haunting isn't just the revenge. It's the suggestion that the world has rules we don't understand, that animals, especially cats, may serve something ancient and divine, that vengeance doesn't need guns or ghosts, it just needs patience. In Ulthar, evil isn't met with justice, it's met with inevitability. The room. To him, room is the whole world. A bed, a lamp, a wardrobe, a skylight, a tiny TV, and Ma. He's 5 years old. He doesn't know there's anything beyond these four walls, because he was born here, in captivity. His entire life has happened between a bathroom door and a locked steel hatch, and the man who comes in at night is not his father. He's the reason they're here. But Jack doesn't know that. He thinks room is just life. He plays, he learns, he sleeps in the wardrobe while Ma gets visited by Old Nick. She teaches him to count. She shields him from reality like her body shields him from the cold. Because what else can she do? Room isn't a thriller. It's a slow unraveling of innocence. The horror isn't in what you see, it's in what Jack doesn't. Because everything feels normal to him. Every moment is wrapped in Ma's effort to make hell feel like home. But then, one day, she tells him the truth. There is an outside, and they are going to escape. It's not easy. It's not cinematic. It's terrifying. Jack doesn't want to leave. The world is too big, too loud, too real. And when they finally break free, it's not a rescue. It's another kind of trauma. Because Jack doesn't know how to be a person. He doesn't understand open space, stairs, strangers, trees. The air feels wrong. The sky is too high. And Ma, finally safe, is crumbling. Because freedom doesn't undo captivity. It just exposes the cracks. What makes Room one of the darkest stories ever written isn't just the abduction or the abuse. It's the intimacy. The way it's told through Jack's eyes. How the voice of a child full of wonder and confusion makes the truth so much harder to bear. You don't watch a mother suffer. You watch her pretend she isn't. The cement garden. Their mother dies in the summer. No funeral, no calls. Just a quiet agreement. They bury her in the basement, under cement. 4 siblings, alone in a crumbling house. No adults, no rules, no outside interference. Because if the world finds out they're orphaned, they'll be split apart. And that is worse than death. So they keep it secret. At first, it's survival. Groceries, chores, playing house. Then the house becomes something else. Decay creeps in. Dust thickens. The smell downstairs never really goes away. The lines between parent and child, brother and sister, begin to slide. Roles blur. Authority collapses, and the silence becomes heavy. Jack, the narrator, is 15. Awkward, detached, obsessed with his body. He works out constantly, feels nothing, watches everything. His sister Julie becomes the mother figure, but not in the way you'd hope. The children become feral without noticing, and the reader watches helplessly as they cross boundaries, unspoken, forbidden, irreversible. The cement garden is not about shock, it's about numbness, the way grief curdles in silence, how a house becomes a coffin when no one is allowed to leave, and how quickly human beings revert when nobody's watching. The scariest part is, no one stops them. The neighbors don't ask questions, the outside world doesn't care. Society shrugs and looks away, because sometimes the worst things happen not in chaos, but in neglect. By the end, the house is rotting. The cement tomb downstairs is cracking, and the siblings aren't siblings anymore. There's something else, a closed ecosystem, a family without walls. Someone finally knocks on the door, and you realize it's already too late. The cement garden asks, what happens when children raise themselves in a vacuum of grief, secrecy, and guilt? Never let me go. They grow up in a school called Hailsham. Polite teachers, art projects, walks in the woods. It looks like a British boarding school until you notice what's missing. No last names, no parents, no future plans, no mention of the outside world. Just a constant whisper. You're special. Kathy, Tommy, Ruth. They dream. They fight. They fall in love. But underneath every moment is a silence they all feel but don't question. Like a string tied to the ceiling they've been taught not to pull. Until one day they do, and the truth falls like a curtain. They're clones. Created in labs, raised to be healthy, sheltered from the world, so that one day, when they're old enough, their organs can be harvested. One by one, their hearts, their lungs, their lives, and they accept it, because it's what they were made for. They don't run, they don't rebel, they love, and then they go on donations, because somewhere deep down, they've been trained to believe that their lives only matter in pieces. Never Let Me Go is a tragedy written in whispers. No explosions. No dystopian wars. Just 3 people holding hands as the world quietly devours them. Kathy narrates everything with gentle nostalgia, as if remembering a summer that never really belonged to her. She talks about love like it's a rumor, about death like it's a scheduled appointment. Even when she and Tommy try to fight it, try to ask for a deferral because they're in love, it's too late. The system doesn't care, the world never listened, and no one ever truly saw them as real, because they weren't meant to be seen. They were meant to be used and discarded. The darkness of Never Let Me Go isn't in the science, it's in the society. A world where comfort is built on quiet cruelty. This perfect day. Everyone is happy. There's no war, racism, religion, individuality. Everyone is healthy. Everyone is equal, because Uni says so. In this perfect day, the world is run by a machine, a computer named Uni. It monitors every citizen's schedule, food, sex, sleep, and thoughts. Names are simplified. Bob, Lee, Anne. Choice is an illusion. Emotions are flattened, and once a month, you get your treatment. A little shot that keeps you content. And if you resist, that's what the underground clinics are for. The protagonist, Lee RM35M4419, Chip for short, starts asking questions. Not big ones, just small cracks. Why doesn't he feel anything? Why is every preference decided for him? Why is rebellion always treated like a glitch in the code? And like a computer virus, that doubt spreads. He stops taking his injections. He learns how to lie, how to remember things he was trained to forget. Slowly, painfully, he claws his way back to something resembling free will. But what makes this perfect day so chilling isn't the loss of freedom. It's the fact that most people like it. They're not prisoners, they're believers. They call the past the time of hatred. They think choice is chaos, pain is error, and Uni, gentle, flawless Uni, has saved them all from themselves. Chip escapes, finds a hidden island where rebels live naturally. But even here, something's wrong. The leaders manipulate. Truth bends, corruption seeps back in. And Chip realizes what Uni always knew. You don't have to chain people. You just have to convince them they're free. In the final act, Chip returns to destroy Uni. But the people don't cheer. They weep. They rage. Because in perfect order, they found comfort, purpose, identity, even if it cost them their souls. This perfect day is the kind of darkness that doesn't shout. It smiles. It sedates. It offers you peace and pats your head while you sleep through your own erasure. Because if a machine makes all your decisions, eventually it doesn't have to. You'll stop making them on your own. Oryx and Crake. The world has ended, and Snowman is the last human left. He sleeps in trees, eats whatever hasn't rotted, talks to creatures that don't understand him because they were never meant to. They're the children of Crake, beautiful, docile, genetically designed to replace us. And Snowman's best friend built them before he destroyed everything else. Oryx and Crake begins with ruins. Flashbacks. A man slowly dissolving in heat stroke and memory. Snowman, once called Jimmy, remembers when life was comfortable, when corporations owned everything, including your genes, when pills extended youth and dreams were engineered, when his friend Crake, brilliant, detached, godlike, decided that the world was sick, overpopulated, diseased, corrupt, so he fixed it. He created a virus, disguised it in a miracle cure, sold it to everyone, then watched as civilization collapsed. And Jimmy? He was just along for the ride, smart enough to see what was happening, too weak to stop it. He watched the apocalypse come in slow motion, from inside a luxury dome. And then there's Oryx, a girl from nowhere, a memory with 1,000 faces, sex-trafficked as a child, sold in pixels, passed around like data. Crake loves her. Jimmy loves her. But she's never truly there. A symbol. A ghost. The only one who saw the end coming and smiled anyway. By the time Jimmy realizes what Crake has done, it's too late. Everyone is gone. Except the new species. Naked, peaceful, chemically sterilized, immune to greed and jealousy. A perfect world. Without us. The genius of Oryx and Crake is that it never screams apocalypse. It whispers inevitability. Genetic engineering becomes advertising. Human lives become data points. Every step toward destruction looks like innovation. Until suddenly, you're alone in a jungle, talking to lab-grown beings who call you the prophet of a god who never existed. A man walking barefoot through the ashes of a planet we thought we could upgrade. And if you think this future feels far away, you haven't looked outside lately. Machine Man. It starts with a missing leg. Charlie Newman is an engineer. Brilliant, awkward, detached from humanity, but deeply obsessed with machines. One day, he loses a leg in a work accident. And instead of despairing, he's fascinated. Because the prosthetic, it's better, smoother, faster, replaceable, efficient. And suddenly, he sees it. A future without weak flesh, without pain, without limits. So, he removes the other leg, then the arms, then other parts. Piece by piece, Charlie replaces himself, not because he wants to die, but because he wants to improve. And human bodies are messy. They break, they rot, they feel too much. But a machine can be perfected. What begins as one man's obsession becomes a blueprint. The company notices. Investors get interested. Soon, they're designing limb upgrades, spinal replacements, organ swaps. Voluntary amputations become a trend. Insurance companies sponsor upgrades. And what was once science fiction turns into a tech startup revolution. Charlie becomes a product, a prototype, a success story, and a warning. Because as he becomes more machine than man, something slips. His empathy, his hesitation, his soul. He starts speaking in formulas, solving emotional problems with code, seeing people as inefficient systems needing upgrades, until finally, love becomes a glitch, friendship becomes unnecessary data, pain becomes irrelevant. The horror of Machine Man isn't body horror, it's ideological horror. A slow, logical spiral into post-humanism. Charlie's not evil, he's logical, he's us. If every flaw could be replaced, why wouldn't we? If a better body meant a better life, why stop until one day you wake up, stainless, painless, and alone, staring into a mirror made of titanium and wondering when you last felt anything real? Steppenwolf. He calls himself the Steppenwolf, not because he's wild, but because he's split. Half man, half wolf, civilized and savage, an outsider in both worlds. Harry Haller wanders the city like a ghost in his own life, too intellectual for ordinary pleasures, too cynical for belief. Books bore him, parties drain him, his thoughts spiral. He dreams of suicide not as tragedy, but as relief. A release from a life that feels like someone else's skin. And then, one day, he sees a sign. Magic Theater, for madmen only, and the descent begins. A mysterious woman pulls him into a world behind the world, a hidden layer where time folds, identity fractures, and masks peel. He dances, he loves, he trips through mirror mazes of memory and fantasy, and in this kaleidoscope of madness, he meets himself, over and over. Because Steppenwolf isn't a story, it's a breakdown. It's what happens when someone finally looks inside and finds not oneself, but 1,000 screaming to be heard. The Magic Theater isn't real, or maybe it is. Doesn't matter. What matters is that every character is a reflection. Harry learns that the problem isn't the world. It's that he's never learned how to play in it. He thinks suffering is noble. Pain is intelligence. Joy is for the shallow. And Hesse rips that idea to shreds. Steppenwolf is a psychedelic spiral into ego death. A raw, relentless stripping of identity until all that's left is a man trying to forgive himself for being human. It asks questions no self-help book dares touch. What if your depression isn't an illness, but a truth you haven't learned to carry? What if the pain isn't the problem, but the story you built around it? Harry doesn't escape his darkness. He learns to laugh at it. And in that laugh, not happiness, not healing, but something deeper. Permission. To be both man and wolf. To be broken and still dance. To be real without apology. The Metamorphosis. He wakes up wrong, not groggy, not sick, wrong. Gregor Samsa opens his eyes and realizes he's a bug. Not metaphorically, not in a dream, literally. A giant, hideous insect flailing on his back in bed. And the first thing he thinks about is work. Because he's late. Because the train is leaving. Because his family relies on him. Because even when your legs are twitching and your shell is scraping the wall, the world doesn't care. It just wants you productive. At first, they knock on the door, then they beg, then they scream. But no one opens it. No one really sees him. And when they finally do, they recoil. They don't ask what happened. They don't cry. They don't wonder how a man turns into vermin overnight. They just figure out how to move on without him. His sister brings him scraps, at first. Then she avoids his room. Then she calls him it. His father throws apples. One rots in Gregor's back and festers there. His mother weeps, not for him, but for what he's done to them. Gregor becomes a burden, then a memory, then a problem, and then he dies, quietly, alone, without ceremony. And the next day, the sun rises. His family goes outside. They feel lighter, hopeful, as if some invisible weight has been lifted. That's it. That's the story. The Metamorphosis is the most polite horror story ever written. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase you. It just asks, what if you stopped being useful? What would happen if your only value to the people you love was gone? Would they care? Would they try? Or would they adapt without you? Gregor's transformation isn't the tragedy, it's the test. And the results are bleak. Kafka doesn't give you monsters. He gives you mirrors. And yep, that wraps up part 4. Hit the playlist for the rest.